Welcome to a special bonus episode, everybody. We are so excited to be releasing the first episode of our Undying Bonds series onto the public feed during our 5-year celebratory Patreon drive that kicked off this week.
This episode was originally featured on our Patreon feed, and it's part of a regular series we are doing over there called Undying Bonds, which is a game design collaboration where Ryan and I put our heads together to create an RPG based on Nova and Lumen that combines our favorite aesthetics, our signature styles of magical girls and necromancers.
What more could you want? You got magical
Literally
girls
nothing.
and my necromancers. You got necromancers and my magical girls. It's that peanut butter and chocolate commercial, only cool things.
Two great tastes that taste great together.
Absolutely. Well, we have been releasing at least one of these every month on Patreon for everybody at the $5 and up level. And the series itself goes into some really fantastic design discussion. Once we have something playable, we're going to be recording our playtests and putting up some AP on there as well for all the patrons. Also, when it's playable, our patrons at that level will get a playable version of the game themselves. So they'll be able to play test right along with us, which is really exciting.
Listening back recently to this first episode, because I wanted to remember what it sounded like before we put it out, I realized exactly how much has changed since that very first episode.
Yeah.
Too. So hopefully that little tidbit of information entices you to find out more. Because I think this episode had a really great start, but where we are at now is fantastic. I can't wait to see where it goes, and I really hope that you'll come on that journey with us.
Absolutely. As for the Patreon drive itself, you can find out all about some of the fun things that we are offering over the next couple of months. But we still really need your help. We have had 2 new patrons join since our last episode released. And we are extremely thankful that you were able to join us. We're going to give proper thanks in the first episode of our series this month, coming up on Monday. But in the meantime, we are currently $28 away from our very first goal during this drive. And if we hit that $100 goal, not only will we be covering all the costs that we put into this podcast ourselves, all $5 and up patrons will get a set of custom C3 branded 16mm Chessex D6s. They're looking amazing.
They're so cool.
I cannot wait to get them.
We picked such cool colors. I'm so excited.
I know. I'm really excited. So if you want to support us or if you just like unique dice, you can sign up to be a patron at patreon.com/charactercreationcast.
One more exciting Patreon announcement before we get to this episode. We are going to start offering another perk to all patrons going forward, and that is our series character sheets.
Yeah.
We've been talking a long time about putting them out somewhere and trying to figure out how to do that in all the ways. And right now, we think that putting them out on Patreon for all of our patrons is going to be great. We've had a couple patrons ask about this. So we hope you enjoy looking over our characters as our series releases. So that's going to be going forward. We'll be good about doing that. But also I am going through my old files and stuff and seeing what I have. So I'll be posting some of those. So for some series, I only have my own character sheets. It'll be kind of hit or miss for stuff in the past, but going forward, you'll be able to get everything. And honestly, for this upcoming series, I wrote everything down for those ones too, so I will post my very scribbly notes for those as well.
They are gorgeous and color-coded and well worth the price of admission there.
Yes. As always, if you have other ideas of what you might want to see from our Patreon, please feel free to let us know. We're always open to new suggestions and cool things, and we would really love your support.
Absolutely. We will have so much more to offer throughout the coming months, so stay tuned here to hear how things are going and any more details as we release them. Until then, enjoy this special bonus release of the first episode of Undying Bonds, everybody. Well, welcome to a special bonus segment, patrons. You are amongst the few that get a very early sneak peek at a game that Amelia and I are going to be working on. We like to blend our nonsense, as you know. So we're going to be blending our magical girl and necromancer loves into a game tentatively called Undying Bonds right now, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be illuminated by Lumen, and it's going to be a hardcore, like super metal magical girl necromancer game, basically.
Yes.
A lot of potential for drama, a lot of potential for some really amazing battles, all that sort of fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought we would record the process to give you a kind of a front row seat of the design process and see kind of what we go through.
Yeah, I'm excited. We haven't done anything like this together before.
Yeah.
I've only kind of done this process one other time. So I guess we should just like dive in and start.
Yeah.
For right now, the system that we'd like to use is Illuminated by Lumen, because we think it would be fun.
It would be fun. Like if you listen to our Nova episodes, you can kind of hear my brain ticking away with like, ooh, I want a magical girl version of this. And like, does it exist yet? It doesn't seem like it does. I would like to make it. And then I never had time to just sit down and do it.
Right.
And then Amelia's like, hardcore magical girls? Let's throw some necromancy in there and good to go. So that's what we're kind of thinking to do. I have some preliminary notes. So let me go over what I had with you first, because we haven't talked about this before.
Right.
And if any of these sound like, that sounds great, let's explore that later. That sounds like garbage, let's throw that out now. That's perfectly fine. It's very basic what I threw out there beforehand.
Yeah.
So my initial ideas were like 8 to 10 magical girl archetypes to work with.
8 to 10 is a lot.
8 to 10 is a lot. But I mean,
should we start with 6?
We could start with 6. So we'll say 6 to 10. 4 powers per archetype, which kind of mirrors the Nova.
Yeah,
sort
I mean,
of
you want to have
set.
enough room to kind of play around with different combinations of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
And then like in Nova, you get different mods and stuff, right? And the mods allow you to do cool things, or they augment your abilities or whatever, right?
Yes.
They can increase your ability scores and all that sort of stuff. So I was thinking we could, instead of using mods, you get like, and it could be anything. I said power crystals, like for your magical girl gear. And then you basically are able to swap these crystals out between your missions and get a different array of ability boosts and alterations and stuff.
Okay, kind of depending on what you are doing.
Yeah,
what you're going to be doing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the missions themselves, they can be like handed out by your magical animal companion or something like that, right? Because like it almost feels like you're going to be playing magical girls in like a really bad battle. Like, you know, this is years after the big bad of the magical girl season 1 annihilated everything and succeeded at their task. And now you're working your way to overthrowing them.
Okay. We feel like we need like a because I feel like if you're getting missions just from your own animal companion, that doesn't necessarily like tie a group together. I feel like we need like, what is our Zordon?
Right.
You know?
And that's traditionally in the magical girl genre. There is usually only one companion for the whole group.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
In Sailor Moon's case, there's 2, but really Luna is the one in charge.
Right. Okay.
Whereas Artemis is just kind of like the cheeky, side companion.
Sure.
That was, I guess it originated because Sailor Venus was the original comic, the original manga, but that's besides the point. So like magical companion.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting because I'm not super like magical girl.
Yeah, you're not super well versed in the magical girl genre, but
yeah,
I think you've got I've got
a pretty good lock on the necromancer thing.
Yes, the necromancer portion, and then you've got like those 2 years of any experience with the breadth of rules and game design and like what works, what doesn't, and stuff. And I think that'll be a really, really nice addition to this.
Yeah.
All right. So then for character creation, I just started with something really simple. You pick your archetype, you add points to your stats. The stats I had come up with were love, justice, and passion.
Okay.
Where love is like your practiced or sincere actions. Justice is like your powerful sort of actions. And passion's like your swift sort of actions, like the heat of the moment, sort of actions.
Okay.
Things you do without thinking, that sort of stuff. And then between those 3 stats, that'll be all of your like combat abilities, based off of stuff like that, like Nova has. But then when you're outside of combat, Nova's got this like really basic use of those stats that I don't fully understand yet, that allows you to use those stats in various situations and stuff, right? So
I'm trying to remember.
It seemed
how
like
it works.
This isn't the point of the game, so it's not a big focus of like why you're using these stats. It's just you've got the 3 stats and you have to justify which stat you're using, like an approach style, right?
Right. Which is a thing that I really love in games.
Yeah.
Is like, tell me how you're doing this, and then potentially the results will vary depending on which.
Yeah.
How you went about this.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
And then I had like your max health and your max heart will get set then. Health is pretty self-explanatory. That's like your physical health, right?
Right.
Going in there. And then heart is like the stuff that you spend on your powers and abilities and stuff.
Which I think is fuel in Nova, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that like you got your heart in the game, you're able to do cool stuff.
All right.
And then you get 2 crystal mods off the bat.
Okay.
So that's like the super basic high level character creation, right?
Okay.
Now the really interesting thing about the magical girl genre is it's as much about the mundane as it is about the extraordinary.
Right.
Right. Whereas Nova is a power fantasy. Like 95% of the focus of Nova is kicking butt.
It's those missions.
Yes, those missions. You're doing some really cool stuff. Maybe you're stealing mods in a heist or something like that. Maybe you're going against the unknowable darkness, right? All that sort of stuff. So like, I would love to see if we can kind of balance the rules to be both about the combat as well as like the
I'm
mundane
wondering
stuff.
if we need this whole time we've been like, Lumen, it's great, perfect.
Yeah.
And I think in a lot of ways it is. But you and I are narrative focused players. I like the combat in Lumen. Because it appeals to that sort of puzzle solving kind of thing. It's not just a hit it with a sword.
Yep.
And especially because it keys a lot off of the other players.
Yep.
It's not in like the way it is in a lot of RPGs where combat is the one time that there are these distinct turns.
Yeah.
And you do still have that here, but what you do keys off of being set up by other people, which I think is really great for that magical girl team.
100%.
Part of it.
Like that tickled that portion of the magical part of my brain that said this is a magical girl anime combat. Right? Where they're setting each other up for the finishing move sort of thing.
But I'm wondering if we need to kind of have a marriage of systems here to do something with that
the social
downtime
aspect.
Thing, because I think that's really important.
Yeah. So let's make a note here. Illuminated by Lumen for the combat mission portion. Can we blend it with another sort of system?
Mm-hmm.
Or at the very least, take inspiration from how another system might handle the more mundane aspects of the game.
Because it is important to me that they don't feel completely divorced from each other, that you're not playing two different games and having to learn two different rule sets, obviously.
Yeah, that's important to me too. Like your love, just, and Sebastian will still be, there. There might be something in the it's the Magical Girl game by Kevin Petker, where I think this is the one that I'm thinking of. You have to do stuff in the mundane world, and that recharges your abilities to do stuff as magical girls.
Yeah.
So it could be like a system of like doing mundane things and playing out mundane narrative stuff gives you more heart to deal with. Or maybe since it's akin to a video game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nova is and Lumen, we could have like boosters, like multipliers. You gain multipliers or boosters for the cool combat stuff. The more mundane drama sort of stuff that you take care of.
Yeah.
So they could kind of feed each other.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, I want the systems to feel compatible, but I'm a huge proponent of that concept that not every system is meant to do everything. And I don't know that Lumen is something that is meant to really have those
the social
sort of downtime interactions that are necessary. And ideally would like help set up the things that are happening in those combat scenarios, because you don't want those to be completely divorced either and just be like, now we go on a mission.
Yep. Well, because that's another huge staple of the magical girl thing, right? Is the mundane happenings and problems that they face in the mundane world directly tie in with the monster of the week. They tie in with like the villain's plans that week, all that sort of stuff. So like the fact that you play out mundane scenes and now thematically the stuff that you're going to be facing deals with those mundane topics that you've covered could be really interesting. Mm-hmm. Especially if we have the cadence of like an episode of a magical girl show where you start mundane, things start happening, and now you have to go on this mission and then, rinse, repeat sort of deal.
So here's my question.
Yes.
And this may not necessarily like matter, but I like to talk things out, which is why this is good to do as a podcast.
Exactly.
Do we want to set Lumen as our main game and try to like make something else do the mundane, or do we want to pick something that like does that mundane and say we really like combat in Lumen?
Well, that's an interesting thought. Let's think about that.
Right. Yeah, it's just, everything at this point is just like let's throw out some ideas, do some talking points.
See what sticks. Because either way could work, or we could find out that Lumen is fine enough and we don't need to get that granular as long as we've got the right feedback loops. Right. Yeah, as long as the things play off of each other in a way that we need them to. And that's something that I think will require a little more research from both of us on this
system and how it really works, and possibly even reaching out to Spencer and saying, how do you think we can, you know, like, what is your advice on doing this too?
Right. Because one of the things I'm thinking of right now is like, well, maybe one of the ways to get new crystal mods is to do mundane stuff. And like, maybe it's unlocked by emotions. Like, so if you role play certain emotions, you can pick from certain crystal families or something like that, right?
Yeah, I think I think this is going to be an ongoing theme of me saying scale back. Scale back, because, you know, you're like, what if we made a game with 18 genres and 6 playbooks each? And, you know, and I'm like, that's just chimera. Let's start with something that we can run a one shot of.
100%.
And then go from there.
Yeah.
But I think in order for that to stay interesting, you're going to need to have a variety of crystal mods that you can get at a variety of levels.
Yeah.
And you're talking about having to make all of those, because I think if you only have like 4 or 5 crystal mods, doing the mundane stops being super interesting, because you're not, it's no longer exciting. You're not gaining access to this new.
And I guess the question is how long would a campaign be for this type of game? Right. Like, are we shooting for something that can be run perpetually and it's just done whenever you're done with a story? Is it like a 10 session thing to, you know, fully nicely wrap up what you can do and get to your peak level, quote unquote? Or is it something that's more geared towards like a 4 session or even a one shot sort of deal, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think as far as designing a game, I would want to start with something that can be run in a one shot.
Yeah.
And then kind of figure out how to expand it from there. Like, I need the game at a baseline to be playable. How it scales then becomes another aspect of it, I think. I do think for a magical girl game, especially one called Undying Bonds, we need room to explore those relationships. And I don't know that that's something that you can do easily in a one-shot.
Exactly.
You know, not without really kind of skipping over
you have to accelerate a bunch, especially
I would
if
like
you're
this to not be like, you know, the 10-minute recap of last season. I would like to be an actual season, you know?
Exactly. And I think the character creation has to be swift enough, but like still have those like connections that you can pull on in there. So like,
I mean, you need to start with some kind of connection, but I also think that part of the magical girl part of it is that those relationships need to be malleable.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we can figure that out. What if we, especially for an initial like version, we focus on the doing magical girl stuff, because that feels like an achievable goal that has the most knowns to it.
So like when you are in magical girl form?
When you're in magical girl form, to see if the like, that's kind of would be the main draw of a power fantasy magical girl necromancer sort of game, is doing wild stuff in combat against, you know, the weirdest magical girl undead enemies of whatever, right?
Right.
So I think if we can hone that in a little bit, then we can, in the meantime, do research on how can we loop the mundane in.
How can we make this interesting, and how can we tie the two together?
Exactly.
My other question here is, how are we incorporating the necromancy part of this, where it's not just like running the game in black and white? You know what I mean? Like, where it's not just an aesthetic choice, but like a narrative, mechanical decision as well.
So my initial thoughts, I had put in for the rules, like one of the things in Nova is when you hit 0 health, that triggers a supernova ability or whatever. I forgot what it's called exactly. And that's your like, I'm at 0 health. I do this really out there thing. And now I'm back on my feet and I'm ready for combat. Right.
Right.
So I thought, well, magical girls in all the magical girl shows that I've seen, unless it's like, you know, quote unquote, a cutscene, when they get knocked down bad by the enemy, they always get back up. They always find a new power. They always find a way to best the evil that is, you know, plaguing them for that episode or arc. Right. And so my initial thought was, at 0 health, you're down, but not out. And then you call upon one of the ancient magical girl souls, and they answer your call. And then you can have like this scene with this person that used to be a magical girl and was killed in the past by the enemy you're fighting. And then their soul blends with yours.
Okay.
And that causes a surge of magical energy. That soul's now a part of you, and you gain what is left of their memories.
Interesting.
Which I think could kind of like really spiral into something really interesting and cool.
I think that decision is going to have a huge impact on the mundane part, though.
100%.
You know, and kind of changes. I think it has a very powerful impact on how mundane the mundane actually is.
Yes.
I also want to question, is that too much like alchemistresses?
Well, a little bit, right? I might
yeah,
have
I mean,
got
you're gaining someone else's
memories, right? And that does pull a little bit of inspiration from that, I'm sure.
I also wonder, like, not to rain on your parade, but how well does that work in a group dynamic?
Right.
If I have this now, like this patron whose memories I have, but like nobody else has memories, or if they do have memories, they're not necessarily connected to this same patron that I have, I feel like we do slightly run the risk of like having it be the Amelia show this week and the Ryan show next week. And the, you know, like if those complicated stories don't blend with each other.
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily want it to be like the same patron for everybody because that's not as interesting.
No.
So I think that's just like a thing to think about is how can we make sure that whatever the result of this is something that can be incorporated into the mundane and can be done in a way that isn't singularly focused on one person.
What if instead of like, you're down and you just consume the whole soul of this one person that's random, right? What if during a mission you get a group, like a previous group of magical girls that had died, like the whole group was wiped out, and Headspace. Headspace. Like a Headspace sort of situation, right?
Headspace.
I like it. Okay, I think I see where you're going.
I'm gonna just make a little note here.
Yeah.
Headspace.
And like every
the idea of having to pull memories from, even if it's somebody that's like previously lost in your own group.
Yeah.
Because I also think that has the potential to.
Oh, you're right.
Help form bonds in the mundane. Because you are all collectively grieving and trying to like make up for this sort of hole in your group. And there's a lot of emotional baggage there, especially if you are then like, if you're down and you have like the spirit of this, former group member or whatever. Bestowing one of their powers upon you. Because if we each have like 4 powers or whatever. If they are bestowing some of their powers onto you, but you also get like, added like emotional guilt about these things, you know? And how does that, like, because I think you also maybe inherit their feelings about other team members too.
Yes.
And have to grapple with the way that, you know, factors in with your own feelings about those team members too.
I like that. And I was also thinking two things here.
Mm-hmm.
Like each time you hit 0 HP in a battle, you pull a little bit from one of those spiritual guardians. And that, like, it doesn't get tapped out until maybe the end of the mission or whatever, right? But like, you get the memories, you get potentially the pain of those memories, and now you're getting to know these people more, and you get to have the memories of, like, you know, ultimately maybe them seeing their companions get killed in front of them and that sort of stuff. Maybe. So
are these like former groups? Like, this is not a person that was ever part of your group.
It could be, I think. And
that's how I was thinking about it.
That comes to my second point of, in Illuminated by Lumen, there's not a concept, or at least in Nova, there's not the concept of your character dies.
Right.
Right. Because it's a power fantasy of, like, you're going to win. It's just a matter of how. Right.
But I also think that doesn't necessarily mean no one died before.
Right, exactly.
Like, we've had technological advancements since then that, like, you know, and maybe that's part of it too, is that, like, this could have been prevented if it had been now.
Yeah, exactly. So in this game, what if you could refuse the help when you hit 0 hit points to accept a permanent death and to become one of the souls that can feed your team?
I don't think,
like, that's not part of the, like, you're going to win all the time sort of deal, right?
I also think that that's, like, not as fun to play then.
Right.
Because, like, what are you doing while everybody else is at school?
Well,
you know?
Well, the question would be, like, how does that magical girl spark pass on to another, right? Because, like, are you just random people that are reincarnated from magical girls of the past, technically? Or are you just random people that somehow gained this ability somehow?
I don't know, but I think there's also the question then too of, like, how deep are we going in the lore of this setting?
Right.
Because, you know, especially when you're starting to make a game, like, do you need to know all of those things? Do you need to know how many generations of magical girls there were before you, or if they got their power from the moon or rocks or dead gods? Or
I think that,
like,
would
some
be,
of that kind of becomes aesthetic.
Yeah, that I would say
choices.
we would.
I think it'd be good to have, like, a slight, like, kind of broad idea.
Yes.
But I don't know that we need, like, whole world lore of, like.
No, absolutely not. I don't want a, like, this is the way the world is, now play in it sort of situation. I would love a little bit of collaborative world building at the very least.
Yeah. I mean, but, like, I think I want to make it flexible enough that world building is done by other people.
Yes.
That I'm not, like, we're not making those decisions about.
Correct. That's what I'm saying.
You know, are you, like, I think one of the questions can be is, like, where did you get your powers? Is it something that was passed down from a mentor? Is it some freak accident that you were all part of, and, like, a meteor crashed and now you're magic? Like, you know, to kind of give people those options and let that color their choices from there.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. Let the people decide. Yeah, I think that could be interesting. And then if you choose, because I think a permanent death could be, like, super dramatic, and it
but I feel like that's something for, like, an outgoing player. Because, like, I feel like at that point, if you have this death, you're going to have to make a new character.
Yeah. Is that a bad thing though? Like, is it?
No, I don't know that, like,
that we want to have on the table.
Yeah, I don't know that, like, mechanically it's something that we really need to spend a lot of time on. I think, like, we could easily say right now, hey, if you don't want to continue, you can just choose to die and start over.
Yes.
And that's the mechanic.
I think that's fine. Yeah. That makes sense. And there could be any number of reasons for why. And that can be up to you, I guess.
Right. I think that can be narratively up to the player and the group and the, you know.
Absolutely. All
so
right.
I think that, okay, so the big, like, hold on, I'm going to start a new page here. So I think there are a couple questions we need to answer. So thematically, we need to talk about, like, what happens when you get to that 0 health.
Mm-hmm.
You know, is it a spirit of a former teammate? Is it a god? Is it, you know, like a magical girl past? And what are you getting from them?
Yeah.
Like, what kind of exchange is being made here? What kind of deal is happening? Because I think we want it to be something that has consequences in the mundane world.
Yeah.
But I want it to be something that is emotionally impactful and doesn't take away from a group dynamic. You know, like I said, I think like gaining memories from someone has the potential to like set you off on your own story journey that doesn't match up with what's happening with the group. And I don't want to start like separating people out.
It could be a shared memory amongst the group too. Like you're down, you get this memory from this past soul, and now everybody in your group gets the same memory. And now you collectively have this shared memory as if you were all that person for that memory. And how does that, you know, balance with, you know, you're yourself, but now you've all shared this potential secret, potential like regret, potential like really morose moment in life. Could be any number of things.
I want something that is, I want something that's in the in-between of those.
Okay.
Of like, because I don't, as a player, necessarily like the idea of like, you get to 0 and now you've inflicted something on me because you made this agreement.
That's fair.
Because you chose not to die. Like, now I get this thing.
That's fair.
But again, I don't want it to be like, you've got a whole separate story moment that has nothing to do with what the group is doing. So there has to be some kind of balance in there that's like, this is a thing that impacts the group.
Yeah.
You know, or it impacts the group's story, but isn't necessarily inflicted upon members of the group.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense.
Which is why I kind of like the idea of like a headspace situation where you're like pulling something from someone.
Right.
You know, and now you have this knowledge, but you also have these memories.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of it being a person that you all share in common.
Okay.
So that, you know, if I'm pulling the memories of like our own dead teammate, like that impacts everybody, but technically is only about my character.
Right. That makes sense. So like effectively, this group would have a link to allow them to have shared memories or not shared memories, shared emotions and thoughts, like being able to communicate potentially headspace style.
Okay. So what if it's like in the past, your group has had a mentor of some sort.
Yeah.
And before, like in media res, you've lost that mentor somehow. So this is a person that is important to all of us. They were incredibly skilled and taught us the things that we know.
Yeah.
If you get to 0, you can pull on that knowledge, but you also gain, you know, some of the memories or the emotions or, you know, something like that now is a bond that you have with this dead mentor that other people don't necessarily have.
Okay.
And, you know, you're getting the added like feelings of, you know, reliving that loss and that grief and like, you know, potentially seeing conversations that they had with another member of your group that you didn't know about before. And so how does that impact, you know, my feelings about you now that I know you had this conversation with our mentor about me?
Okay. That's interesting. When I was initially thinking of this, my thought was there's been X generations of magical girls that have all gone against this threat and failed. We're the generation that's going to succeed, right?
Okay.
We're the generation that will for sure defeat this great evil that's been enslaving all of, humankind or whatever, right?
Mhm.
Whatever nonsense that you want to throw on it. And my thought was, we're the ones that are going to succeed because we found a way to pull on the power and abilities and memories and feelings and stuff of all the magical girl groups from the past.
Mm-hmm.
So you can like they basically taken a pool of 4 or 5 magical girls and now expanded that 100-fold because now they've got access to 100 times the power.
Yeah, I just think you run the risk then of like everybody's pulling on a different one from the past.
Right.
Getting something different, and those things don't
maybe
transfer well to like growing that cohesion as a group, because that's a lot of what the mundane stuff is about, is like our interactions with it. It's the intra-party stuff.
Right.
And if we're all pulling memories from like thousands of different magical girls past, it doesn't necessarily like bond us together more.
I wonder if there is a balance we can find between like does it have to be memories that we pull upon from the previous people? Is it just like we're just going to consume their souls and now we have to live with the fact that these souls are no longer out there? And you get to do it as many times as you want because it's a power fantasy, and it's metal as heck to be like, I'm not going to die because I'm consuming the soul of a past person that was a magical girl.
This also brings up a point too, though, of how often are people reaching zero? And if we start making this memories thing or souls thing like a core mechanic, and nobody ever gets to zero.
Well, people are going to get to zero because they're going to want to get to zero, right? Like in Nova, part of the draw is getting to zero and doing that supernova ability.
Yeah. I think my thing is that like I want it to be something like whatever you get from it, like you get to do your supernova ability or whatever, but I want it to be something that
impacts
the group dynamic.
Yes. So
that like we go home after this battle and it's like we go home changed.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we're on the same page there.
Right.
For sure. Now we just have to, I don't expect us to figure it out now.
No, I just want to make sure on the same page of like what, like what level of thing are we talking thematically? What are we talking? Because I definitely want it to have something to do with necromancy too.
So getting to 0 health changes something about either the group or the group. Something in the group changes. The dynamic changes. Something changes. We'll figure it out.
Right. Like I said, I want it to be something that happens to you that changes how you interact with the group.
Yes, absolutely. And potentially opens up more drama in especially in the mundane area. That should be good.
Okay.
And then my thought for the mechanics were you get half your health back, rounded up, and then you do some cool stuff, I guess. I'm not really sure what I was rating here. I said then until the end of battle,
half your max health, round up. Then at the end of battle, gain 1 temporary max health and 1 temporary boost to an attribute of your choice.
So you get boosted.
What is temporary max health?
Yeah, so it's like like you gain more health, so you die less often.
But that's not really a temporary boost, then, is it?
Until the end of the battle, right? So if there's
so you're talking about dying multiple times in one battle.
Yes, exactly. So I think that's kind of what I was going for there. I don't think I completed that thought.
Yeah.
I think that was one of the times when I was on my phone and just writing out random.
Yeah. Quick, put this down before I forget.
Pretty much. And I'm like, I don't know if this is anything, but let me throw it in there. And that's one of those nitty gritty mechanical balancing details, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not too worried about that. But I do love the thought of getting a surge of power and doing something super cool when you hit level 0 health.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a core mechanic of Nova.
Exactly.
And so like that will obviously depend on your archetype. So do we roughly, real quick, want to talk about broadly, what are our archetypes?
Oh, interesting. We've got like the hardcore sort of super metal magical girl theme sort of going on right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, and this is a thing that we need to put down as something to research in the future, because the archetypes in Nova are not like air, fire, water, like they are complex, kind of nuanced things. I think my question is, it's like thematically, where are we leaning as far as like, because these won't necessarily impact personality traits so much as like the stats will. We're talking like archetypes are going to relate to your abilities and how you do combat.
What sort of cool like puzzle solving things do you get? Right. Okay. I mean we have to have like straight up necromancer, right? Like raise things you kill from the dead to be on your side. I think that feels correct. Exactly. Gosh,
I mean, and so then what is the magical girl version of like this quintessential is like pulling on, so it's like if I, because we're just going to assume I am necromancer type, right? So if my thing is like pulling on the dead to like add power to us. I feel like the magical girl side of that is somehow amplifying the bonds of our group.
Oh yeah. Like the polar opposite side of that would be
right. So I mean, I wonder at that point, instead of like adding more enemies, or adding more group members to your own group. Are you buffing the people on your like rather than being the DPS, are you the support?
I do like figuring out tank DPS support roles for a lot of these things too, because it's supposed to feel like a video game, right? It was supposed to be like Nova was kind of like the what's that popular game that you play?
Right, yeah, that one.
It's got the Destiny. Yeah. So it's kind of supposed to be like a Destiny sort of riff, right? So like having those main sort of DPS tank, roles,
I mean, I think to start, and then you kind of, for the other 3, if we say we're making 6 or whatever, are sort of like, this is the DPS support, this is the tank support, this is the tank DPS, like kind of in between those things.
I do like that thought.
So yeah, I think you want to have one offensive, one defensive, one that sort of like buffs the people on your team. Okay, I'm just going to write that down for now. Like we don't even need to necessarily sort out like straight necromancer or straight magical girl, but like we want to make these like tank damage support.
And blends of such. That might be a good way to approach them and see what sort of interesting things there, because like, when you're talking about Nova, you've got the sanguine, which is basically your vampire type, and then you've got the plague one, the pox, I think it was called. And so you got like all these interesting, that's your DPS over time, right? Your dots damage over time. So it could be really interesting what sort of directions we could go with that. And I think that'll be a good discussion when we can dive into those.
Right. then I think that in my SMART goals, as always, my sort of like, what are our action items moving forward, particularly what order do we want to try and tackle some of these things? Because I think there is the tendency, the way our brains work, to be like, oh, okay, like I'm going to make this combat type. Oh, but then over in the mundane world, that'll impact it. And it's like, we need to like be like, should we focus next time maybe on creating those archetypes?
Yes, let's focus on archetypes next time, because I think we can make character creation super simple.
Right. I mean, as it is in Nova.
As it is in Nova,
it is just like, pick these 2 or 3 things.
Yeah. And I think there's only a few little additional things we would need to do to character creation to really blend in the mundane stuff. And I don't think we have to go over that right away.
Okay.
So I think if we kind of mirror what Nova does and kind of pull that into a magical girl sort of mindset, that'll be a really good start.
Awesome.
All right.
I feel like this was a good initial chat about what we want to do. Our big action items between now and next time are going to be to read up a little more on Nova, particularly how some of that combat like interaction works so that we can get these archetypes right. We want to think about what that supernova ability can look like. And then we want to figure out something like how to mechanize this mundane part so that it clicks with the the combat part.
Yeah, I think that'd be fun. We'll start out small and work our way in.
Definitely.
Very cool. Well, thank you for joining us, patrons. This was a fun first session. I think we've got a decent amount of ideas to really kind of move forward with this.
I'll be really interested to see how this kind of changes over time too.
Absolutely.
So thank you for joining us for episode 1 of Undying Bonds.